Today, the Conservatives have admitted to failing to declare £38,000 of general election expenses. The party's blamed an administrative error for failing to register the accommodation costs of activists involved in what was known as Battle Bus 2015. It was a key part of the election campaign. The admission follows an investigation by Channel 4 News. Their political correspondent, Michael Crick, joins me now. Michael, welcome to the programme. You've been on this story for quite some time. But I get the impression that every time you go back to it, it gets bigger.
It does, and we keep finding more stuff, and we keep reporting it, and the Electoral Commission is investigating and having to widen and widen its investigation. Now, the key thing is when they conclude that investigation, because there's 12 months after that the candidates report their expenses, just after a month after the election. So, in other words, something has to be done by the beginning of June, when the 12 months is up, for there to be prosecutions relating to, under electoral law, the declaration of expenses. There's two lots of declaration of expenses. There's locally and nationally. Now, locally, every candidate is only allowed to spend about £15,000. It varies according to the number of votes per constituency. And then there are national expenses, which is just under 19 million for the Conservatives at the last election. And what we found is that there's all sorts of campaigning being going on involving these battle buses, where quite clearly they were taking activists to these constituencies, putting them up overnight in hotels, and they were going out and supporting the local individual candidates. Now, the Electoral Commission guidelines say that if you do campaigning in support of individual candidates, that counts as a local expense. Well, the costs haven't appeared on the local expense returns. The cost of the battle bus has appeared on the national expense returns, but the cost of the hotels hasn't appeared anywhere. And it's that cost that the Conservatives have admitted last night that because of this administrative error should have been on the national returns, and they're now going to rectify. But
where will they put it?
Well, they'll put it on the national returns. I think I would argue it should be on the local returns, because they were staying in those local hotels to support local candidates in the southwest, as we reported on Channel 4 News last night. Tonight we'll be reporting on how the battle bus went to the Midlands and the North in support of all sorts of candidates there, most of whom became MPs. And in most cases, if these costs are added in to their local expense returns, then they're over the limit. And they are in trouble, in theory.
And the accommodation was booked in let me be kind, in an elliptical way. Is that right?
Well, it varied from, it was basically booked centrally, but sometimes it was booked through individuals rather than through the party. And this is a pattern that we also uncovered a few weeks ago and reported on in the 3 by-elections. You remember those big by-elections in 2015 when the Tories were determined to thwart UKIP, and it happened in a really big way also in the South Thanet constituency, where the Tories were determined to beat, and did so, Nigel Farage at the last election. So it's all sorts of expenses, basically, that the Conservatives either claim should be national expenses, or they haven't put on any expense returns at all, which we would argue should be attributed to their local candidates.
It's pretty hard not to, I would have thought. If you turn up to help a local candidate, it's not like you're helping, say, a party political broadcast for the nation. I assume that would go on the national ledger. But if I'm turning up to help some local candidate and I get overnight accommodation, that cost has to be for the local candidate.
Well, that's what we would argue, and indeed it's better than that in a way, in terms of proof, in that these people who were on this battle bus, they were proud of what they were doing. They're excited. They were tweeting about it, putting it all on Facebook.
Yes.
Pictures of them and the candidate and their leaflets, and we've obtained, shall we put it that way, the scripts that they went round with, and the script, hello, my name's Michael Crick, I'm calling on behalf of your local candidate, Scott Mann, whoever in North Cornwall, and therefore it's difficult for them to argue that they were purely explaining the virtues of the Conservative Party nationally, and what a wonderful Prime Minister David Cameron was.
Well, it will not have surprised you that we've contacted the Conservative Party this morning. We couldn't get someone to come on, but this is what they told us. CCHQ, I guess that's Conservative Central Office Headquarters, campaigned across the country for the return of a Conservative government. That's not really a surprise. Such campaigning would be part of the national return, not local return, as the Electoral Commission has said. As is apparent from our national return, the party declared expenditure related to our CCHQ organised battle bus. However, due to an administrative error, it omitted to declare the accommodation costs of using the vehicles. I think it was the people that got the accommodation, not the vehicle. Anyway, this is something they say we've already brought to the attention of the Electoral Commission in order to amend the return. So what are they saying there, that the battle bus we can charge to the national campaign?
Yes, that's arguable. You could argue it should be a local expense, yes.
But we admit that the overnight accommodation or whatever it was should have been a local.
Yes, and they say that was an administrative error. No, they say that they claim, they argue that should have been a national expense as well. We would say, no, hang on a moment. You stayed in that hotel in order to fight in that seat, and that hotel to fight.
So they're still trying to put it on the national ledger.
They're still trying to put it on the national ledger. Now, on the national ledger, they were £3.5 million under the limit, so they got a lot of leeway there. And it's less of an offence really not to declare for the national ledger. So, but if it's a local expense, and if it was attributed to these seats locally, then in most cases they'd be over the limit. The candidate would have spent too much, and these legal limits are important in order to create a level, something of a level playing field. Yeah.
Don't go away, because I want now to go to Tessa Munt, stick with this story. She was a defeated Lib Dem candidate in Wales. Tessa Munt, you've been listening to what we've been saying. What's your reaction to all this?
Well, I think it's an extraordinary situation. I mean, the idea that this is some sort of administrative error is complete tosh, really. I know that the constituents in my area were completely sort of foxed by the fact that they'd had, squillions of leaflets come through their door. I mean, my agent tells me that he thought that probably something like, I don't know, £250,000 worth of paper was delivered through doors. And actually, all of those leaflets referred to the fact that this was a campaign that was all about 23 seats, of which mine was one. And, 23 seats does not make a national campaign. We've got photographs of people being briefed. There were people who didn't know what my successor's name was. They couldn't pronounce his name properly, but they were knocking on doors, giving out local leaflets and campaigning on a local level. So I think clearly what's happened is that we've got local election, local campaigning, which is being masked as national campaigning, and it's just utter rubbish.
Do you feel cheated?
I beg your pardon?
Do you feel cheated?
Do I feel cheated? No, but I think my constituents should feel cheated. Because actually, what we have in this country, we've been watching the American elections, haven't we? And what we have to make sure we don't get is some sort of, ludicrous money buying votes. And that's clearly what's happened in this situation. And, it's absolutely ludicrous. And when you look at my election returns, all of the spending is accounted for, we're very clear and very transparent about the way we've actually done everything. You can see every single leaflet I produced and the invoice from the printer, and exactly all of the information is there. And it seems that this is not the way that the other party has chosen to fight its election campaign.
All right, Tessa, thanks for joining us this morning. Mike, finally just come back to you. Is the question now whether the Electoral Commission allows them to put this accommodation as spending onto the national ledger, or forces them to account for it in constituency spending, in which case they'll be over the limit?
Well, I don't know entirely. I mean, they will be allowed to put it on they're trying to put it on the national ledger. But the Electoral Commission is investigating all of this at the moment. They're investigating what we've reported up till now and investigating what we said last night. And it's not clear whether this admission by the Tories results from that investigation, whether they've basically been forced to say that by the Electoral Commission. But the Electoral Commission, the impression we get is that they're actually being quite hard-line. I mean, they have a reputation for being a rather feeble body. Whereas on this one, I think they do realise that something has gone wrong here. Now, the question is whether they will recommend to the police before the June deadline that there should be prosecutions, or the alternative would be to allow, under the law, a 12-month extension for further investigations. Whether they go that far, or whether alternatively they say, look, there clearly was misinterpretation of the rules here, or wrongdoing, or whatever, and that the rules need tightening up, and they may simply go down that avenue instead.
More on Channel 4 News tonight.
Indeed.
Excellent. We'll be tuning in.